Good morning. I'm reporting on behalf of Mark Zenick. Raise your hand if you know Mark Zenick. That's pretty good. Okay. And Mark has asked at the beginning of our series about important people in St. John's life in the past to make a report on his close friend, Peter Elenois, who's remembered today. And for any of you who didn't know Mark or don't know Mark, here's some information about him. This is what he has written to me in response to my request for a biography. After majoring in philosophy and religion, I graduated from Amherst College in 1970. In January 1971, I moved to Ashfield as I began serving my 2 years as a conscientious objector as a psychiatric nursing assistant at the VA hospital in Northampton. While pursuing accreditation as a primary school teacher at UMass, I continued to work at the VA hospital until 1977, when I then began 10 years' work at a new vocational nonprofit organization based in Northampton, which helped people with psychiatric disabilities prepare for and find work in the greater community. I left that position to become the first executive director of the newly established Franklin Land Trust in 1987, where I proudly was able to permanently preserve more than 12,000 acres of farm and forest land over the next 17 years. I moved with my English wife, Marie, to Shropshire, England in 2004 and grew and sold daylilies for 18 years, a passion and a small enterprise I started in Ashfield at New Hope Farm. Owning 2 plant nurseries for 15 years in Shropshire, I became known as the American daylily missionary. During my Shropshire years, I developed my pen and ink pointillism art, being asked to exhibit my work in local churches and public buildings. Also, I have written and self-published 5 small books sharing my experiences as an American expat in the UK. Having been drawn to St. John's Church through the spiritual charisma of its priest, Susan Crampton, I came to know and value so many who worshiped at St. John's. There I met and befriended Peter Elenois, who became a beloved friend and spiritual fellow seeker. To this day, St. John's remains my spiritual home, a family which supported my growth to greater union with God. Susan Crampton will always be my spiritual mentor, a profound inspiration on my personal pilgrimage to love and be loved by God. In 2004, Marie and I moved our lives to Shropshire so that Marie could be closer to her aging parents. I have spent a third of a century living in Ashfield, and it will always own a hallowed place in my history. And here's what Mark says about Peter. Peter was an Episcopal monk for 25 years before leaving that vocation to move to Ashfield, joining St. John's Parish family, and together with his partner, Kevin Blanchard, opened New Hope Restaurant at their home in Apple Valley, a venue which quickly became popular and celebrated for its French-style country cooking. After the restaurant closed, Peter went to work at Yankee Candle in South Deerfield, where he first made candles before managing the new Candle Museum, where he welcomed visitors and tour groups with his natural gifts for hospitality. At St. John's, Peter generously brought his broad liturgical knowledge to the deepening worship of his fellow parishioners. He immediately became the dependable resource to enrich the experience of all through liturgies which lifted and celebrated God's presence at St. John's. Peter also was committed to maintaining high standards for church housekeeping. His faith flourished as St. John's became his beloved spiritual home, a holy Hilltown parish community which fed and nourished him so well. Serving on the vestry, helping out at St. John's booths at Fall Festival, or just seeing to the small mundane matters requiring attention at St. John's, Peter took on the role of unassuming shepherd of so many details of church life. When, in 2004, Marie and I, having been blessed to live next to Peter in his adjoining apartment at New Hope Farm for 5 years, moved our lives to rural Shropshire, England, Peter would come to visit us there at least once every year. He and I, recognizing each other as spiritual brothers, would drive through the bucolic countryside and visit small country churches which Peter adored entering and wrapping himself in the quiet holiness of such ancient buildings and spiritual havens. During these visits, our sharing was far-reaching. We would exchange the names and stories of those who played the roles of saints in the unfolding of our respective lives. I now realize that Peter was and will forever remain a prominent saint in my life. Many who knew Peter perhaps were unaware of how much he adored dogs, sharing a deep, affectionate affinity with dogs back in the monastery, with beloved Joy he and Kevin raised at New Hope, and with my many Labradors he spent such carefree time with at New Hope and in Shropshire. Once, during one of his visits to us in England, he gave me a quote I treasure to this day. With unabashed clarity about exulting in canine company, Peter confessed, "If there are no dogs in heaven, I'm not sure I want to end up there." Never doubting his place in paradise, I take much comfort in knowing that Peter is being looked after by all the dogs he loved and who loved him in this life. Never one to preach, Peter, through his example, taught me many spiritual truths. His cardinal virtue was that he was fully satisfied with the life with which God blessed his days. He did not suffer wanting more than he had. Without ever hungering for more money, status, or recognition, Peter led a contented life of having enough, satisfied with the mundane moments of simple pleasures which came his way. He yearned for nothing more than to be known and loved by God. Witnessing the fulfillment of Peter's last wish to have his ashes scattered in St. John's Remembrance Garden 4 years ago, I took much solace from knowing that my cherished friend and spiritual brother had finally come home. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.